Again, Disability Rights California, we are a statewide nonprofit. And if you have any questions regarding tonight's topic on special education or any other disability related issues such as Medi-Cal or in-home supportive services or access or discrimination with housing or transportation, please give us a call. Our phone lines is in the chat, 800-776-5746, and all our services are free. And tonight we have our presenters, Maria Ariate, one of our senior attorneys, and Mary Rios, one of our senior advocates. So without further ado, I'm going to let them get started. Thank you.
Thank you. So as has been said, today we're going to talk about two things, two tools that you have available when you're not happy with what's happening with the district. One is a compliance complaint, and the other one is due process. And so we're going to talk about these tools. And the third tool we're going to talk about is civil rights complaints against the district. We do have a manual, which is called, if you go on our website, but you've got the link directly to the manual here, it's called Special Education Rights and Responsibilities. Chapter 6 talks about today's subjects. But, you know, all the other chapters have a lot of really good information about a special education student's rights. So I don't, if you, and at the end of the manual, we have an appendix and we have sample letters and that kind of thing. So very useful to look at. So the compliance complaint is a complaint when your rights have been violated. And how do you know whether your rights have been violated? You need to know the law. And where do you find the law? Well, a lot of it you'll find in our manual, because our manual is divided up into chapters. Within each chapter, we have question and answer. And the answer gives you the answer and also cites to the code or the regulation. So that's how you know your rights. And there are rights, for example, that you have the right to, you know, call an IEP meeting. There are also rights that involve timelines. So when you call that IEP meeting, it's got to be held within 30 days. That's what the law says. And so if it's not held within 30 days, the district is out of compliance. They've violated your rights. And so you can file a compliance complaint. And you would file that complaint directly with the California Department of Education. When we're talking about due process, we're talking about something different. Due process involves when you're denied eligibility for special education, or maybe they want to take away eligibility. When you're not in agreement with services, or you're not in agreement with placement. Those are issues that you go to hearing about. And before you get to hearing, there's an informal resolution conference that can be had. You could go through mediation too. And the hearing, AKA due process, is the Office of Administrative Hearings is the entity responsible for special education hearings, as they are responsible for regional center hearings too, and other types of hearings. And so there will be a judge, an administrative law judge from the Office of Administrative Hearings. The Office of Civil Rights Complaint is when the district has discriminated against your child based on disability. So an example of that would be denial of a reasonable accommodation or a reasonable modification, or outright discrimination. Let's say that the school is remodeling, and they have sent a letter to all the children who are in special education, advising that they shouldn't come to school on Fridays. But they didn't do that with all the other students that are not in special education. So that would be an outright discrimination. Just only the kids with disabilities are being told they can't go to school 1 day a week because there's remodeling happening. So, and the Office of Civil Rights complaint is filed directly with the Office of Civil Rights, the Federal Office of Civil Rights. Okay. Let's go back to due process, eligibility, placement, services, right? Services and supports. It's if the service is already in the IEP, because remember, the IEP is the contract between the district and the student. And so the services and supports that are in that IEP are things that the school has to provide. And when the school is not providing the service, then that's a compliance complaint because they're violating the student's rights by not providing the service. It's different than when you're in an IEP meeting and you ask for a service and they say no, or they want to reduce a service or terminate a service. So due process, just know it's only for these types of things that you see here. And you'll know because you'll receive a notice that tells you that this is your next step if you're not happy with the district's decision. So you have 2 years to file for a hearing. You really don't want to wait 2 years. That's a long time in the life of a student, right? That's 2 years, almost 2 years of school. Why would you wait 2 years? So if you think that if you're not happy with the decision that the district has given you, you really want to go to hearing as soon as possible. And I mentioned before the different steps, the resolution session, the mediation, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. If you're looking for an attorney to represent you at a due process, there's a link here that can give you the names and contact information for free or low-cost attorneys. So this is an example of when you would file for due process. So Carlos is in 2nd grade. He has trouble paying attention in class. He has problems socializing with his other schoolmates. Last year, he started to get into trouble with aggressive behaviors. He has an IEP and is eligible for special ed under attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The school wants to place Carlos in a separate school for children with behaviors, and his family wants to keep him in the general education class. And his family also thinks that he qualifies for special education based on autism. So here they were talking placement. They want to move him from the least restrictive environment to a more restricted environment. And if the parents are not happy with the placement, guess what? They're going to go to hearing. It's not a compliance complaint. This is going to be a hearing. They want to also have the school qualify him based on autism. I don't know, Mary, what do you think about this? Does it really matter that is it important for the family to get this in the IEP that there's also autism or not?
I think it's important. It depends. It depends on whether the autism is affecting his education. Many parents do prefer to have autism. Some school districts will push back, but they can also have like a secondary disability on the IEP. So I think it's always good to add it. I mean, but again, it's identifying the difficulties that the student is having.
Okay. Thanks, Mary. Okay. The resolution hearing, if the parent files for due process, then the district has to offer it. If the district files for due process, then the district doesn't have to offer this. Attorneys can only attend the resolution meeting if you bring an attorney. And what are you there for? To try to resolve the matter, right? Informally. What you say during this resolution meeting is not confidential unless you sign a document saying that it will be confidential. And what does that mean? It means that if it's not confidential, whatever you said or the district said or you offered or the district offered at this resolution meeting can be discussed at the hearing. So if the district offered 100 hours of compensatory services at the resolution meeting and now at the hearing is only offering 20 hours, let's say a month or 100, and you didn't have a document saying that what was being said was confidential, you could bring it up and say, well, why did you at the resolution meeting offer 100 and now you're offering 20? But it goes both ways, right? You might have agreed to things or willing to agree to things that now you're not, and the district could bring that up at the hearing. So we say good practice is just to keep everything confidential. If there's an agreement, it has to be in writing, signed by both sides. But guess what? You can rescind your signature. You have 3 days to do it. And this resolution meeting has to occur rather quickly. So within 15 days of the district receiving the parent's request for due process, and it has to be finished within 30 days of that. So you have a very small window to do this. Mediation is an attempt to try to resolve the case. Both sides have to agree to mediate, okay? And what's different between this and the resolution session is that you're going to have an independent mediator. It's another administrative law judge, not the judge who's going to hear the case. And it's the judge's job not to render decisions on your case, but just to try to get the parties to come to a resolution. Okay. And what is said at the mediation is confidential, so it cannot be brought up at the hearing. You know, sometimes you resolve some issues at these informal processes, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you resolve the whole thing. So it's worth, in my opinion, going through this if you want to, because you never know what could happen. Sometimes you can have a really good judge who really pushes the other side to come to an agreement. So why not, do it? The hearing is before an administrative law judge. The judge is supposed to be impartial. It's the judge's job to get all of the facts out and then apply the facts to the law. It's not a formal trial it's not like when you're going to Superior Court or federal court where you have the judge who's on the bench and he's wearing a robe and you've got the jury and you've got the attorneys there. It's not like that. You walk into a room, there's a table, the judge sits at the head of the table, each side sits on a side of the table, and there it is. These due process hearings can go on for a while. You just, I think one of the attorneys in our youth practice group, I don't know, what was Gabriela? She went to a hearing that took weeks. I don't know. It was like this really long hearing that took quite a while. Now let's talk about compliance complaints. So like I said, this is when the district has violated rights, right? So examples of when you would file a compliance complaint. They're not implementing the IEP, not giving some of those services that are in the IEP. They are not assessing a student who's been referred to special education. The law says you have to, it's the child find mandate. Failure to follow timelines for assessing and referral. Failure to follow any of the timelines that are in the law is a violation. which would be subject, which would allow you to file a compliance complaint. Having an IEP meeting without the parents. Parents are an integral part of the IEP meeting. They need to be informed. They need to be there. Another one is you go to due process and the district is not implementing the hearing decision or the mediation agreement or the informal conference agreement, or partially doing it or doing it wrong. Those are all issues for compliance complaints. And I'm now going to hand it over to Mary.
Thank you, Maria. I'm gonna hopefully my internet is stable enough. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So Maria talked about the compliance complaint. Here we have an example of a compliance complaint. So here Ms. Marquez requests copies of her daughter's educational records. Let me turn off my camera, Maria, because she requested copies of educational records on January 15th, 2024. And at the same time, she also requested an IEP meeting. As of August 17, 2024, Ms. Marquez has not received the copies of the records nor a meeting notice indicating that an IEP meeting has been scheduled. So they're way out of compliance. So typically what happens is when parents request educational records, the district has 5 days to provide the parents with copies of records. When they request an IEP meeting, they have 30 days to schedule an IEP meeting. Maria talked about the timelines. So again, whenever they're violating these timelines, you can file a compliance complaint with the California Department of Education. Next slide. So again, you file the compliance complaint with California Department of Ed, or CDE. They must receive the complaint no later than 1 year after you claim the violation occurred. Again, you don't, like Maria said, with the due process, you don't want to wait for a whole year. You definitely want to file a compliance complaint, especially if there's timelines involved where they're not providing either the service that is written into the IEP, they're not holding an IEP meeting. Whatever the issue is, you definitely want to file sooner than later. There is a 60-day timeline that the CDE has to investigate. You can either send your compliance complaint letter to the address that's listed on here, or if you also notice right below, you can file it online. The other thing is what we did is we included there's a telephone number with the California Department of Education. They provide information that on anything that basically has to do with special education. So we wanted to include that information as well and make that available. Next slide. The Office of Civil Rights complaint. When you file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, it basically has to do with discrimination whenever there is disability discrimination. There are federal laws that protect individuals with disabilities, and these are anti-discrimination laws. And these laws protect individuals from schools as well. Whenever a school district receives financial assistance from the Department of Education. So it's really important to know that as well. And this is anything that has to do with disability discrimination. One example could be that a parent is requesting a reasonable accommodation. And a reasonable accommodation could be something as simple as additional breaks or extended time to do homework. These can also be considered discrimination if it's denied because it is a reasonable accommodation that you're requesting. Next slide. Timelines in terms of filing a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights. Typically, you have 180 days of the last act of discrimination. So again, you don't want to wait till the last day. If you file late, you have to show good cause for why you filed late. What's different with a discrimination complaint with OCR, there is no timeline in terms of them investigating the alleged discrimination. You can write it on a letter, you can type your complaint, you do submit it to the Office of Civil Rights, and we've included the address here, U.S. Department of Ed. They're located in San Francisco. You can also look up their information online and on our Special Education Rights and Responsibilities Manual. Next slide. Here we have an example of a complaint for the Office of Civil Rights. Anna is in a special education day class at a local high school. Her school they're doing some construction at the school she attends. And in order for them to complete the construction at the school site at a faster rate, the high school has shortened the school day for special education students by 1 hour. This only applies to special education students, not students who are in general ed. So this is a prime example of disability discrimination. Whenever they take a service just from students who are in special education versus both students who are in special ed and also students who are in general education. Here we've included some additional resources. We have this information is included on our website. One thing that I did want to add to due process, like Maria was explaining, it's very informal, and sometimes it could be very long. It could take more than 1 day. But one thing that I usually recommend to parents is if you are filing for due process, you can go onto the website and look at cases online to see why the judge ruled the way they ruled, what evidence was used to make that determination. So I think that's a really good tool. And you can search by topic. So for example, if you are filing for due process because of placement, I would do, search by, a decision based on placement. So I also wanted to include that. We've also included here a link to a sample letter to a compliance complaint. And again, you can actually file your compliance complaint online. We have the Special Education Basic Toolkit, the Behavior and Discipline Toolkit, disagreements with the school districts. And as Maria indicated, we also have the appendix section on our Special Education Rights and Responsibilities Manual. And that has sample letters on how to request records, how to request an evaluation, how to file a compliance complaint. It has a lot of good information. We also have a sample letter there on when a student turns 18. And usually what happens is when a student is going to turn 18, they try to keep the parents out of the IEPs and allow the student to make their own decisions. However, if the student wants the parents involved and wants the parents to make the decisions that have to do with the IEP, they can sign a simple form that basically says, I'm giving parents authorization to participate and make decisions in the IEP. But these sample letters are in there. So we've come to the end of the training. If there are any questions, I don't know if we want to pause the recording.